What would you do if three identical little girls, all with the same serious blue eyes and the same constellation of freckles across their noses, approached your table in the hushed elegance of a five-star hotel restaurant and whispered, with the gravity of a life-or-death mission, for you to pretend to be their father? Tariq al-Jamil was contemplating this very question, though a moment ago his mind had been occupied only by the delicate steam curling from his silver teapot and the quiet weight of his own solitude. He sat alone, a figure of stark contrast in the gilded room of cream and gold. His dishdasha was a crisp, immaculate white, his keffiyeh a bold pattern of red and white, held in place by a simple black agal. He was a man accustomed to being observed, but not like this. Not by three small spies in matching pink sweaters, who now stood huddled by his chair. The one in the middle, clearly the instigator, took a tiny, brave breath. "Please," she whispered, her voice urgent but small, so as not to carry. "Just for a little while. There's a mean lady watching us." Tariq did not look around for the mean lady. His gaze remained on the three faces, each a perfect echo of the others, yet unique in its expression. The leader, who had spoken, had a look of fierce determination. The one on her right clutched a worn teddy bear, her eyes wide with nervous hope. The one on her left simply watched him, her head tilted, as if she were a scientist studying a strange and unpredictable new element. He had boardrooms that were less intimidating. He said nothing for a long moment, his large, still hands resting on the white linen of the tablecloth. He simply observed them, this tiny delegation of childhood desperation, and felt a profound and unfamiliar ache in his chest, a hollow space he had long since learned to ignore. He finally gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a gesture he usually reserved for sealing billion-dollar deals, but it felt more significant now. A current of visible relief passed through the trio. The leader, Faith, gave a sharp little nod back, as if they were co-conspirators. "Okay, we're going to sit down now," she announced in a businesslike whisper. "Our mom will be back in a minute. Just act like you know us." The three of them scrambled into the plush chairs around his small table, two on the banquette beside him, one in the chair opposite. They looked absurdly small against the high-backed velvet, their scuffed sneakers dangling far above the Persian rug. The girl with the bear, Hope, placed her stuffed companion on the table next to the sugar bowl. The quiet observer, Grace, began meticulously arranging the silverware at her place setting. Tariq watched them, a strange sense of unreality washing over him. He poured a small amount of tea into a fresh cup, the amber liquid shimmering under the chandelier. He pushed it gently toward the center of the table. He didn't know what 10-year-old girls drank. He didn't know what 10-year-old girls did at all. "My name is Tariq," he said, his voice a low, calm rumble that seemed to absorb their frantic energy. Faith looked at him, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Okay, Tariq," she said, testing the name. "Today, your name is Dad." A frantic woman in a dark red dress suddenly appeared at the edge of their table, her face pale with panic. "Oh my God, girls, I am so sorry," she began, her words a rushed torrent of apology aimed at Tariq. "I just turned my back for a second to take a call. They know not to bother people. I am so sorry." This was their mother, Lena. The red dress was simple but elegant, the color of a fading rose, and it seemed to be the only vibrant thing about her. Her shoulders were slumped with an exhaustion that went deeper than a single difficult afternoon. Her hair was pulled back in a simple knot, but strands had escaped, framing a face that was both beautiful and etched with worry. She looked at her daughters, then at the imposing, traditionally dressed man they were sitting with, and a flush of pure mortification crept up her neck. "Girls, get up right now. Apologize to this gentleman." But none of them moved. Faith crossed her arms, a stubborn set to her small jaw. "He's not a gentleman," she stated with irrefutable child logic. "He's our dad." Lena's eyes widened, and she looked at Tariq, her expression a silent plea for him to end this bizarre, embarrassing charade. But Tariq didn't. He looked at Lena, taking in the frayed edges of her composure, the protective fire in her eyes, and the sheer weariness holding her down. He saw a woman trying to hold the world together for her children with nothing but her bare hands. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a silent signal. "It is all right," he said, his voice calm and steady, a rock in her sea of anxiety. "They have not been a bother." Lena stared at him, confused. She saw no anger in his dark, quiet eyes, no impatience. She saw only a strange, settled stillness. She opened her mouth to insist, to drag her children away and disappear into a cloud of apologies. But a voice from across the room cut through the air, sharp and coated in saccharine sweetness. "Lena, is that you? What a surprise to see you here." The voice belonged to a woman named Eleanor Davenport, a perfectly coiffed and surgically polished woman dripping in understated, brutally expensive jewelry. She was Lena's ex-mother-in-law's best friend, a walking embodiment of the life Lena had lost, or perhaps had never truly been a part of. Mrs. Davenport's eyes swept over the scene with predatory amusement. Lena's slightly wrinkled dress, the three fidgeting girls, and the foreign man in his striking robes. Her smile was a thin, cruel line. "I was just telling Margaret the other day. I wondered how you were all managing. It must be so difficult." Alone, the word hung in the air, a deliberate poison dart. Lena flinched as if struck. The color drained from her face, leaving behind the pale canvas of her humiliation. This was why the girls had done it. From this angle, Tarek could see the table where Mrs. Davenport sat with another woman, a table with a perfect view of theirs. They had been watching, they had been judging, and Lena's daughters, in their own 10-year-old way, had decided to fight back with the only weapon they could imagine: a father. An impressive, unshakable father who could fill the empty chair and absorb the slings and arrows of women like that. He understood now. It wasn't just a game. It was a shield. The weight of their silent request settled upon him. No longer a strange curiosity, but a profound responsibility. He had been chosen. Without a word, he signaled for a waiter, his movement fluid and commanding. The air of authority around him was not something he manufactured. It was simply part of him, like the color of his eyes. The waiter materialized instantly, his posture deferential. "Sir." Tarek did not look at Mrs. Davenport. He did not acknowledge her presence in any way, which was, he knew, a far more potent dismissal than any retort. He turned his attention to the girls, his expression softening. "I believe we were about to order," he said, his voice carrying just enough to be overheard. "My daughters will have whatever they would like. And their mother?" He paused, his dark eyes meeting Lena's for a brief, significant moment. "Will have the same." Lena's breath caught in her throat. The way he said it, "their mother," was a quiet, definitive statement. It drew a circle around the five of them, leaving the rest of the world on the outside. He was not just playing a part. He was rewriting the scene. The waiter, sensing the shift in dynamics, turned to Lena with a newfound respect. Mrs. Davenport's smile faltered, a flicker of confusion crossing her features. This was not the narrative she had been constructing. Faith, seizing the opportunity, immediately ordered 3 enormous chocolate milkshakes and a platter of miniature cakes. Hope whispered a request for macarons, and Grace asked for a bowl of strawberries. Tarek approved it all with a simple nod, then ordered another pot of tea for himself and a chamomile for Lena, as if sensing she needed its calming properties. He had taken control not with anger or wealth, but with grace. He had met public judgment with private dignity, and in doing so had handed that dignity back to Lena on a silver platter. She sank into the empty chair, the fight going out of her, replaced by a bewildering sense of being sheltered. The milkshakes and cakes arrived, a magnificent, sugary feast that stood in stark contrast to Tarek's ascetic pot of tea. The girls fell upon the food with the single-minded joy of children. For a few minutes, the only sounds at the table were the clinking of spoons and happy sighs. Mrs. Davenport, having lost her audience, turned back to her companion with a dismissive sniff, but the damage was done. Her attack had failed. Lena watched Tarek as he watched her daughters. He didn't seem uncomfortable or out of place. He possessed a quality of stillness that was magnetic. He wasn't trying to entertain them or force a connection. He was simply present, his attention a quiet, steady gift. She finally found her voice, keeping it low so only he could hear. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling achingly inadequate. "You didn't have to do that." He turned his gaze from the girls to her, and she felt the full, unnerving force of his focus. "She was unkind," he said simply, as if that explained everything. Kindness costs nothing to give. Its absence, however, can cost a great deal. He spoke with the quiet certainty of a man who understood value far beyond the monetary. In that moment, Lena understood that the girls hadn't just picked a random stranger. They had, with the strange, unerring instinct of children, found the one person in that entire room who was safe. The afternoon passed in a surreal haze. He asked them about school, about their favorite books, about the worn bear sitting on the table. He listened to their answers with genuine interest, his head tilted slightly, his eyes missing nothing. He learned that Faith was fiercely protective. Hope was a dreamer who loved to draw, and Grace had a tender heart that felt everything deeply. When it was finally time to leave, the bill was settled with a discreet flash of a black card. Tarek walked with them to the hotel's grand lobby, the three girls gravitating around him as if he were their own personal moon. As Lena gathered their coats, she felt a pang of sadness. This strange, magical bubble was about to burst, and they would be back to their ordinary, difficult life. "Thank you again," she said, meeting his eyes, "for everything you gave them. You gave us a really lovely afternoon." He simply inclined his head. "It was my pleasure." They said their goodbyes, and Lena shepherded her daughters toward the revolving doors, her heart a confusing mix of gratitude and loss. It wasn't until they were home, in their small, cluttered apartment that felt a world away from the hotel's opulence, that Grace cried out, "My picture!" She had drawn a picture for her father, a wobbly, heartfelt crayon drawing of a smiling stick figure on a boat, and had left it on the table. It was the first birthday since he'd left, and the drawing was her offering, her message in a bottle. Lena's heart sank. The drawing was irreplaceable, but the hotel was miles away, and the thought of going back, of facing that world again, was exhausting. She hugged Grace, promising they would draw a new one, even as she knew it wouldn't be the same. Later that evening, as she was washing the dishes, there was a knock on the door. Her stomach clenched. They never had unexpected visitors. Peeking through the peephole, her eyes widened in disbelief. It was him, Tarek. He stood in the dimly lit hallway of her apartment building, looking just as composed and out of place as he had in the fancy restaurant. He was holding a small, folded piece of paper. She opened the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I believe this belongs to one of your daughters," Tarek said, holding out Grace's drawing. He must have seen it after they left. He must have found her address somehow, a feat that was probably trivial for a man like him but felt like a miracle to her. He could have had it delivered. He could have thrown it away. But he had come himself. He stood on her worn welcome mat, a billionaire in a thobe, holding a child's crayon drawing as if it were a precious document. His gaze drifted past her into the apartment, taking in the small, tidy living room, the pile of colorful library books on the coffee table, the crayon marks on the wall she was always meaning to scrub off. He wasn't looking with judgment, but with a quiet, observational curiosity. "Please," she found herself saying, stepping back. "Come in." Just for a moment he entered, his presence seeming to fill the small space. The girls, hearing his voice, came running from their room, their faces lighting up with pure, unadulterated joy. "You came back," Faith shouted, a wide grin splitting her face. He knelt down to Grace's level, his white robes pooling around him on the floor. "You forgot this," he said softly, handing her the drawing. She took it, clutching it to her chest as if it were the greatest treasure in the world. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes shining. He stayed for only 10 minutes, but in that time, the entire atmosphere of the apartment shifted. He noticed a wobbly leg on their small kitchen table and, with a few deft turns of a loose screw, fixed it. He admired a drawing Hope showed him, pointing out the clever way she had drawn the clouds. He spoke to Lena about the traffic on his way over, a simple, normal conversation that felt shockingly intimate. This became the start of something new and undefined. Tarek didn't disappear. He began to appear quietly and consistently in the small corners of their lives. It was never with grand gestures. He didn't shower them with money or extravagant gifts. His currency was presence. He would show up on a Saturday afternoon with a bag of groceries, not as a handout, but with a suggestion. "I was thinking of making lamb tagine," he would say. "I require assistance from 3 expert vegetable choppers," and they would spend the afternoon in their tiny kitchen, the scent of cinnamon and cumin filling the air, the 4 of them working together in a comfortable rhythm. He introduced them to mint tea, served in small, delicate glasses he brought one day. It became their ritual, a moment of calm in the chaos of their lives. He would sit on their lumpy sofa and help the girls with their math homework, his patience seemingly infinite. He listened. He listened to the girls' rambling stories about school, and he listened to Lena when she talked, late at night after the girls were in bed, about her fears and her dreams, the crushing weight of her loneliness, and the fierce, aching love she had for her daughters. He never offered solutions or platitudes. He just listened, his quiet attention a balm on her frayed soul. He was, she realized, the calmest person she had ever met. In a world that demanded she constantly hustle, worry, and perform, his stillness was an anchor. The pretense from that first day had faded away, replaced by something real and solid, built not on a lie, but on hundreds of small, quiet truths. One evening, months after they had first met, he arrived with 4 tickets. They were for a special concert at the very same hotel where their story had begun. Lena hesitated, the memory of her humiliation still a tender bruise. "I don't know, Tarek," he looked at her, his expression serious. "We are not going back to that day," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "We are making a new memory in its place," and so they went. Lena wore a new dress, a soft blue one she'd bought on sale, but she felt more beautiful in it than she ever had in the defiant red. The girls wore matching blue dresses he had gifted them, their excitement a bubbling fountain of energy. Tarek wore his traditional attire, but as he walked through the lobby with a small girl's hand in each of his, he no longer looked like an isolated figure. He looked like he belonged. They found their seats in the concert hall, and as the lights dimmed, they saw Mrs. Davenport a few rows ahead. She turned, her eyes widening in surprise as she saw the 4 of them together. She saw Lena, poised and serene. She saw the happy, confident girls. She saw the powerful man sitting protectively beside them. A flicker of something, confusion, perhaps even envy, crossed her face before she turned away, vanquished not by an argument, but by the simple, undeniable picture of their happiness. During the intermission, as they stood sipping lemonade, Grace looked up at Tarek, her small face serious. "You're better than a pretend dad," she announced loudly. "You're a real Tarek." He looked down at her, and for the first time, Lena saw him smile, a true, deep smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. He placed a hand on Grace's head, a gesture of affection that was both gentle and profound. Later, as the final notes of the orchestra faded, Hope fell asleep, her head resting on Tarek's shoulder. He didn't shift, didn't move a muscle, letting her sleep. As they walked out, Lena found her hand slipping into his, the contact feeling as natural and necessary as breathing. He enclosed her fingers in his warm, steady grip. They didn't need to pretend anymore. What they had, built on a child's desperate whisper in a hushed restaurant, was more real than anything either of them had ever known.